Here's a bombshell that could reshape the entire AI landscape. American lawmakers are prepared to wage economic warfare over computer chips, and the target is squarely on Nvidia's billion-dollar export business. Picture this scenario. You're a U.S. startup, desperately needing cutting-edge graphics processing units to train your breakthrough AI model. But you're stuck in a months-long waiting line while these same chips flow freely to international markets. Sound frustrating? That's exactly the problem Congress wants to solve with a controversial new piece of legislation. The GAIN AI Act of 2025 represents a dramatic shift in how America approaches technology exports. Originally introduced as an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act of 2026, just last month, this bill has now secured a spot in the Senate's latest defense bill draft, according to Americans for Responsible Innovation, a non-profit organization monitoring the legislation. But here's where it gets controversial. The proposed law would essentially create a U.S. customers first policy for semiconductor giants like Nvidia and AMD, requiring them to satisfy all domestic demand before shipping their most powerful graphics cards overseas. The legislation specifically targets what lawmakers describe as a frustrating paradox in the current market. As the bill's text bluntly states, the demand for advanced artificial intelligence chips far exceeds the supply, and United States persons are forced to wait many months, if not longer, to acquire the latest chips. Meanwhile, these same chip manufacturers continue selling their products to countries that maintain close relationships with nations under U.S. arms embargoes. Think about the implications for a moment. Small businesses, universities, and startups across America, the very innovators driving our technological future, are essentially competing with foreign buyers for access to hardware manufactured by American companies. The GAIN AI Act aims to flip this dynamic entirely. Under the proposed right of first refusal system, Nvidia and AMD would face strict limitations on their export activities. These companies could only pursue export licenses for countries like China if they could demonstrate zero backlog of requests from U.S. customers for equivalent products. Additionally, the legislation would prohibit offering better pricing or contract terms to international buyers compared to domestic customers. But wait, there's more complexity to this story than meets the eye. Current U.S. policy already prevents Nvidia from shipping its flagship gaming cards, including the RTX 4090 and RTX 5090, to Chinese markets. However, this past summer brought a significant development when the company successfully negotiated permission from the Trump administration to sell a less powerful enterprise chip designated the H20 to Chinese customers. Here's the catch that most people miss. This arrangement requires Nvidia to hand over 15% of all sales revenue from these Chinese transactions directly to the U.S. government. President Trump had even suggested he might eventually allow exports of newer GPU models to China, albeit with deliberately downgraded versions of Nvidia's advanced Blackwell architecture. The GAIN AI Act threatens to derail these arrangements entirely. The legislation specifically calls for restricting the export of less advanced artificial intelligence chips to foreign entities in countries of concern, so long as United States entities are waiting and unable to acquire those same chips. This language suggests that even mid-tier graphics cards could face export restrictions if American customers are still waiting for similar hardware. Americans for Responsible Innovation celebrates this development as a huge win for domestic technology industries, provided the legislation survives the Senate process and remains attached to the National Defense Authorization Act. The organization's president, Brad Carson, frames the issue in stark economic terms. Globally, these chips are supply-constrained, which means that every advanced chip sold abroad is a chip the U.S. can't use to accelerate American R&D and economic growth. But here's where the controversy really heats up. Nvidia has pushed back hard against this approach, drawing direct comparisons to previous Biden administration regulations that Trump later reversed. In a pointed statement, the company dismissed the underlying concerns as based on doomer science fiction, and argued that international sales actually benefit American businesses by expanding global markets. Our sales to customers worldwide do not deprive U.S. customers of anything, and in fact, expand the market for many U.S. businesses and industries, Nvidia declared. The company went further, accusing critics of spreading fake news to Congress about chip supply, in an attempt to undermine Trump's AI action plan and damage America's global computing leadership. And this is the part most people miss. Nvidia's resistance might actually have valid economic foundations. The company specifically noted in recent earnings calls that it hasn't shipped any H2O units to China yet due to ongoing geopolitical issues between the U.S. and Chinese governments. They've also categorically denied rumors that H20 production reduces supply availability for other Nvidia products like the H100, H200, or Blackwell series. This raises some thought-provoking questions about the entire premise of the legislation. If Nvidia isn't actually reducing domestic supply to serve international markets, does the GAIN AI Act solve a real problem or create unnecessary barriers to global commerce? The timing couldn't be more critical. As artificial intelligence transforms every sector of the economy, access to high-performance computing hardware essentially determines which companies, researchers, and entire nations can compete in the AI revolution. The question becomes whether prioritizing domestic access over international sales truly strengthens America's position or potentially weakens it by limiting market growth and innovation. Here's what makes this story even more intriguing. We're witnessing a fundamental clash between two competing visions of American technological dominance. One side argues for securing domestic advantages first, ensuring U.S. innovators aren't disadvantaged by supply constraints. The opposing view suggests that global market leadership requires serving international customers and maintaining technological influence worldwide. So here's my question for you. Does forcing American chip companies to prioritize domestic customers actually strengthen our competitive position? Or does it risk creating the kind of protectionist barriers that could ultimately harm our global technology leadership? Are we solving a real supply problem, or are we creating artificial scarcity that might drive innovation elsewhere? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think Congress is right to prioritize American customers? Or should market forces determine where these chips go? Drop your perspective in the comments, whether you're Team America First or Team Global Markets. This debate affects everyone working in technology today.